Today, I sat down with Dr. Megan Schmidt, a psychologist in private practice and an instructor with the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine, where she teaches clinicians how to work with trauma, attachment, and the nervous system. Her work centers on a fundamental question: how do our earliest experiences shape the way we move through the world? Megan brings both clinical depth and practical clarity. She understands that the patterns we carry, anxiety, reactivity, disconnection, are often rooted in early developmental environments where co regulation and attunement shape not just how we feel, but how we learn to relate, trust, and perceive safety itself. In this episode, we explore how those early relational dynamics become embedded in the nervous system, how they show up later in our relationships, decisions, and sense of self, and what it takes to begin working with them, not through force, but through awareness, regulation, and integration. Here's where we begin. Our basic programming as human beings isn't productivity. It isn't achievement. It isn't even success. It's connection. But today we live in a very different environment. We're more digitally connected than any generation in history, yet many people report feeling profoundly alone. Relationships are increasingly mediated through screens, attention is fragmented, community structures have weakened, and people are often navigating stress, trauma, and uncertainty without the kinds of support systems humans evolved with. If connection is our deepest biological and psychological need, what happens to individuals when the need is consistently disrupted or unmet?
I think we live in a dysregulated nervous system if our needs for connection are not met or are met in a fragmented way. And that can show up in a lot of different ways because everyone's body and experience in their body and of their nervous system is different. But I think we're all walking around in some form of dysregulation if we're not getting our needs for connection met.
When we use the word connection, we often use it to mean relationship or emotion, but neurologically, connection begins at birth. Can you explain what co-regulation is, both biologically and psychologically?
When I first hear that question, the first thing I think of, and something I say to my clients routinely as they begin therapy, just to ground them in this framework, is we are mammals and we are biologically designed and innervated to co-regulate. It means that every moment of every day, we are engaged in a body-to-body conversation with the beings around us. And we are constantly in this subcortical, it's not about thoughts, it's not about thinking, body dance with other people. And it starts with baby and caregiver. And something I talk with clients about also is that of all mammals, human babies come out with the least developed nervous system, which is a little staggering. Like our time with caregivers before we can go off and explore the world is the longest in the mammal world. Like you think of prey animals and fawns or little calves that are dropped in the open grasslands and they can spring up and evade a predator right away. That's not the human infant. The human infant needs so much skin to skin regulation, co-regulation with the caregiver to regulate its body temperature, its heart rate, its breathing, and all of those kind of physiological systems to be able to stay regulated. And I think that's really powerful to think about. And how our earliest touch memory, we can't know this with the thinking part of our brain, but I've said this to clients and I've said it very sensitively because some people may have enormously disrupted relationships with their caregivers, like neglect or trauma or abandonment. But if we are here today, we're alive, we were held enough, we were cared for enough by someone, maybe not even the primary caregiver, maybe someone stepped in. But I will say it's most likely that our earliest touch memory, our brain won't know it, but our body will, is being held, and most likely, you think about that position for human infants, skin to skin, right at the chest.
There was recently a viral video of a monkey named Punch. I don't know if you saw this or you've heard of it.
No.
He was abandoned and rejected by his mother and subsequently all the other monkeys. And then they gave him a stuffed animal, little monkey. And of course, in the age of cell phones, there's tons of videos of him both being rejected and then just completely connected to this little toy. And now reports are that he's been improving socially ever since. So it reminded me, going back to my university days, of the Harry Harlow's attachment experiments. So as you were talking about this skin to skin and our nervous system and how critical this is, I was thinking about just contact comfort and the role that it plays in early attachment and development, and ultimately, I'm assuming, personality and who we are.
Yeah, hard to draw like a one-to-one. I don't know the studies or the science, like the one-to-one correlation of how does our personality develop from that. But I know all of our implicit memory, our felt memory in our body, not accessed by our thinking brain, but accessed through sensing and feeling, and that whole imprint that is there through our adult lives that influences how we feel around other people is largely formed in those very formative years where we're highly co-regulating with a caregiver. Now, we're always co-regulating, but we need it intensely when we're little infants and we can't control our respiration and all those things I was talking about before. When I'm thinking about co-regulation, it's not just touch, it's all those things that caregiver and infant do, if we're lucky enough to experience this. The cooing, that kind of, there's a word a lot of attachment theorists use, reciprocity. It's that thinking about co-regulating of making noises and faces, and mirroring is another term you'll hear attachment theorists use, that all of those things are very critical in the development of regulated nervous system and being able to healthily co-regulate, because we can also co-regulate with others. That doesn't necessarily, the word co-regulate doesn't have directionality implied where it's always positive co-regulation.
Sure.
Co-regulating can be, there's two very disrupted or dysregulated nervous systems.
It's the vibes, right?
It is the vibes.
In your experience, do you see people with a range of sensitivity, and does that connect into some of the experiences and patterns they might have had? Is it positively or negatively correlated
with early experience?
Yeah.
It's hard to prove 2-1 because we can't go back and necessarily observe and know what did and didn't happen in those early years. But to answer the first part of the question, absolutely. When I think about people in my life, my own family members, myself, not to mention clients, I think I see a real range of sensitivity to co-regulating with others, aka picking up on vibes. And you'll hear people say, self-identify in all these different ways, like highly sensitive person, right?
Yeah.
Is a term we hear, or introvert, or people who say, I feel the feelings of other people. I get really overwhelmed when I'm around other people. I'm overcome with what I sense their emotions are. So that may be a kind of one extreme of the continuum. And I think we all have interacted with people who seem relatively unaffected by other people's mood states So much of our early environment and things that are, again, our thinking brain may not remember, but our body is the repository for all those felt experiences. And that gets into implicit memory. There's our explicit kind of autobiographical memory where we can say, this happened to me when I was this age, and here are these major events, and I lived here and I moved there, and this is the arc of my life. And I'll talk about that with clients. So there's a story that we can tell about ourselves, but our body tells a different story. But it's implicit memory. It's what is learned. It's what's learned procedurally or implicitly, which is below the thinking mind. Think about driving a car. When you get in a car, say, I've got to depress my foot on the pedal a millimeter right now and turn my wrist this many degrees. It just happens. And our attachment behavior and our co-regulation with other beings is procedurally or implicitly learned, where it is automatic. Anything that we have to do over and over and over and over again will go from our working memory, which is 5 to 7 seconds long, into short-term memory. And then eventually we'll go into our procedural or implicit memory. And it's all kinds of things, like even patterns of eye contact. There's
Oh,
really
wow.
interesting research that later in life, how comfortable we are maintaining gaze or not can be about early learning with how much gazing was invited by a caregiver, how dysregulated that caregiver may have looked or not looked. And so all of our attachment behaviors, eye contact, how our voice, our affect, how close or distant we are from people, our posture, our overall level of arousal when we're with other people can be part of our implicit or procedural learning. And it's the job of therapy to make some of those patterns explicit through different interventions to see if there's some learning, new learning that can have so insights about the self, but then maybe some new patterning. It's like, why do I always feel anxious with people? Or why do I immediately feel agitated if someone seeks connection? Or why do I constantly feel sad when someone leaves? These kinds of patterns are procedurally learned.
That is so fascinating. I recently spoke to a guest. We were talking about dysregulation came up, and I used the road rage example.
Yeah.
It's one of those triggers for me that I would love to not be that person, but I am. And he just happened to have the same one. And he said, I remember as a little boy watching my father. He's a very calm, even tempered man. But when he got in the car, he was someone else. And I am now the same way. So it's interesting. As you were talking, I was also thinking about how these patterns then end up being passed down and then become part of this ancestral lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And in companies, we call it the culture, but it ends up
Yeah.
being the norms of the family.
Yes.
And if you don't have other friends or distant relatives who act differently, you think that's how the world is. You think it's just how things are. I know you do a lot of somatic work.
Mm-hmm.
I had a personal experience when I was 2, I fell down the stairs. And something around, I was probably 15, 16 years ago, I think I was walking down the stairwell. We were all rushing for a train. And I almost relived having that feeling in my body. I felt like I was falling down the stairs. I've read Bessel van der Kolk's Body Keeps the Score, recognizing that there's a percentage of what's held in our body that we'll ever come to truly understand. In your work, you're helping people recognize that it's there and then draw those connections. Think
Can I
about,
ask you,
yeah,
is it okay to, I
please.
really
Oh,
want to,
please do.
yeah, I really
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to interact with that anecdote. For example, is the falling when you were 2 something that you somehow remember with your analytical brain, your autobiographical, or where you have, I'm assuming you had to be told.
I had to
So
be
it's a,
told.
yeah, that's a,
Yep.
and we'll talk about that a lot with therapy with people. It's okay. That's not an explicit memory. It's something you had to be told about your autobiography. And yet knowing that you have a hypothesis, and I bet you're right on that, whatever you felt there in Penn Station, that
It was something bigger. You know how people explain that there's that one term that when it's hysterical, it's historical. This wasn't hysterical, but it was that sort of experience where I've done enough work that I
yeah,
understand that this
you're like,
isn't
this isn't
just
in the
about
now.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
That's the way of
This
saying
is,
it.
yeah. And that's a big concept in working with trauma in the nervous system is, you can think of a traumatic event, and that is a traumatic event. Falling and being out of control of your body and being little. There's the feeling of being out of control in your body and the potential for catastrophic harm. And there's the relational piece of where's the adults and where's the
Exactly.
caregiving and who's responding. You just said it out loud as we kind of had a moment there of, this feels like it's in the now, but it doesn't belong here. And people can feel crazy. They can feel out of control. They can feel shame. It's, what is this experience I'm having? And a lot of the work in therapy is in the beginning is psychoeducation. Just like, why does our body do what it does? I always say, you're not sick, you're not bad, you're not crazy. I'm going to make three positive assumptions here. Can we agree on that together? And then can we get curious? And can I tell you some things I know about the body and the nervous system? You can think about trauma as a memory disorder. It's the imposition of the past on the present. But because our body sensations are only ever experienced in the now, or heart racing or anxious feeling, or we're getting hot or tingly, we think it's right now, but the body remembers in sensations and feelings and arousal states. And it's very tricky for us. Unless someone sits us down and explains basic neurobiology, how would we know that is our body remembering something from the past? So that piece of psychoeducation can be pretty profound for people who,
Absolutely.
yeah, just feel like their body's taking them on a ride all over the place and they wonder what's wrong with me. And it's like your body's really sane and it's remembering, and it's we may not know. We may not know. You were able to be told what happened at 2, but a lot of times clients are having experiences in their bodies that are very disturbing, and we can't go back in time and know exactly what it was. So we have to do a lot of real gentle framing of, we may not be able to do some kind of fact-finding mission and know exactly what was there, but we can make this good faith assumption. If your body is having this experience right now, then it was encoded that way in the past. And it may not have been anything anyone around you intended, but that is how it got encoded, and that's what we're going to work with. So there's a truth to what the body holds, even if we can't go back and square that with the family reckoning or facts at that time.
There was another viral video that really moved me. It was of a little 4-year-old boy who must have just had a meltdown of some kind. The video is the aftermath where he's sitting in bed and the mother's sitting by his side, and he's very calmly explaining to her how, yeah, I had lost my temper and I was mad. And he was really articulating his meltdown. It was really remarkable to see a child like that be able to put words that many, even adults, sometimes we struggle to do. But what I really found remarkable was his mother. She was just very calm by his side, and she was making eye contact, and she was letting him speak as much as she wanted, but then periodically she would reflect his words back to him. She wasn't rushing him. And then she would just gently help him reframe his point of view, or help solidify his self-reflections. And I thought, oh, wow, this kid's going to do great. This is what we all should have had, right? Ideally, this would be wonderful. I'm guessing very few of us, certainly I didn't have that experience, but what a different experience it would be to grow up in a world where you had that internal coherence at 4. And then what happens between 4 and adulthood, those experiences must be so different. I'm guessing some of this comes up in the work that you do. And I'm wondering why the process of that mirroring and naming is so important.
Yeah, that's an example of really beautiful co-regulation. Good co-regulation, like that mom is giving that child, can really help with that internal sense of coherence because pieces are attunement, and I'll talk about that a little more in a moment, and the mirroring and being social beings and having this nervous system that is largely grown through this interactive co-regulatory dance with caregivers. We're exquisitely sensitive to all those cues. So going back to the human infants having the least developed nervous system of all mammals, it's 30% innervated when we're born. So the rest of our nervous system is literally growing through that dance with caregivers. So attunement, feeling, felt, that's my definition of attunement. So
That's
it's
wonderful.
yeah, I think it's so important to feel felt. It's the mother is maybe repeating some words, oh, so it was like this? Yeah. Okay. Yes. And then what? But really, the magic is in moving in close and communicating with prosody. There's like some research and theory on the use of prosody, which is like the rhythm and tonality of our voice can be really co-regulating, and our affect and our body language. So it's really how we are communicating with our whole being, that we are interested, we are available. Attuning also has a mirroring in it. So helping someone feel felt. It's someone, if that little boy is saying, I was mad. It's like, yeah, you were mad. You can see in my face or hear in my voice for a moment. Matching that, we want to match in a slightly more regulated form to help someone else's nervous system potentially drop. Um, I'll do a little experiment with clients and I'll say, okay, imagine that you come in and you're really hurt and activated and agitated about something that happens. And I talk to you like this. And Mary, you can see what happens in your body when I do this. Oh, wow. Mary, it probably doesn't feel good. I don't know what happened. You can tell me what happened there, but imagine being agitated.
Yeah.
Does that feel good?
Yeah. It doesn't. And I'm imagining if you were too,
Yep.
if you also got upset or angry, it would also, there really is this
Agitate you.
calibration of, yeah,
There's a
like you're,
calibration, but if
yeah.
you were upset and you told me this really distressing thing happened to me and I met you in a slightly more regulated form. So I'm not as activated or more. I'm also not too calm. I have a little firmness in my voice and I'm a little emphatic and say, that's really upsetting. That's awful. Yeah. Okay, tell me more. That makes me have a reaction too right now.
It's interesting because we speak, I'm guilty of it, but so much of what you're saying, it's encoded in every
Every
sentence of
interaction.
every interaction.
No.
I think about the first thing, I'm on the train and the ticket, something happens, like you go to sit down, is the seat taken? There's this exchange that you're talking about is happening. We're sending
All the
these
time.
signals out all the time. And just by bringing awareness to it, first of all, being awareness in ourselves, because like you were saying, like maybe there's a scenario where I'm sure it happens. You're very tired. You're meeting with a client and something's going on with you because you're human, and maybe you want to match that, but for some reason it's off. That person might pick up on it. And so even someone as trained and experienced as you are very aware of the impact of this. But most of us are walking around all day long, just energy in and energy out without really paying much attention to it.
Yeah.
And it is so powerful. The example of being on the train, everyone has this thing where you put your bag next to you. You don't want people to sit next to you. And then as the train fills up, someone comes by and they're looking sheepish and apologetic that they have to ask you to pick up the bag. And just how you react to them. Some people kind of cluck and are annoyed and pick up their bag. And then sometimes you just smile. And the quality of that interaction for the rest of the train ride is going to be totally different. Now, that's a very benign and banal example. But you think about all the opportunities we have throughout the day with all of our relationships. And then you're talking about people who have had experiences early on where maybe their early caregiver was very frustrated when they brought anger, sadness, or any kind of emotion. And so that's coming into the interaction with the other person.
And yeah, you're absolutely right that in a psychotherapy space, we're hopefully bringing trained intentionality to that body to body dance with a client. But that does not mean that I'm always perfectly attuning, and part of my training, we'll feel it in our body. If I don't attune to a client, I'll feel something in their reaction back to me. And in my training, it is important to look at that space between the therapist and the client. So I might pause and say something like, hey, I think something just happened there, and I think I might have missed you. And then I'll just pause and see if there's some kind of confirmation and invite discussion. Because the other part of attunement is we're not going to do it perfectly. We're walking around in bodies that are reacting and getting triggered all day long, mostly outside of conscious awareness. We have this huge right brain and somatosensory cortex, and any fragment of a smell, a sound, a taste could trigger some kind of reaction in our nervous system, and we don't even know that just happened. And then we try to make a cognitive attribution, and it's usually I'm bad, you're bad, or our relationship is bad.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't even really, we can't really like perceive our own neurobiology and why we're feeling triggered, but we come up with those explanations. So I'm not always going to attune perfectly, but being able to name that with someone, and we don't just have to do this in psychotherapy, we can try to do this with loved ones, and we can even do this with people that aren't that close to us. And wouldn't that be radical to say, hey, I think I just, something just happened. I think I missed you somehow. Did I not get that right? Or am I not cluing in? And that opens up the gateway for potential repair. And I love talking about repair because our culture is so big on apologizing. And I will talk to my clients about, okay, there's attunement and there's inevitable repair. When we misattune, we're all going to misattune. We're imperfect. And people think that repair is, I'm sorry. And I actually think those words can be so distancing. Think about the first word in that phrase. It's I'm, but self-referential. It's the opposite of attunement. It's the opposite of helping the other person feel felt. And it often doesn't land in a way in the other person's body where they feel seen. And so I will try to model as a therapist, oh, I missed you, and that looks like it did not feel good. That looks tough that I didn't get it. And nowhere in there are the words, I'm sorry. Because then people often, that can tap into old learning where we feel beholden to say, it's okay. How many of us have said, it's okay, okay. But the feeling felt like, oh, that did not feel good, did it? I didn't get it. I missed you there. And that can feel so good to feel seen and cared for when someone says that.
Oh, there's the opportunity. I'm so glad you brought this up as I wanted to get into rupture and repair as well, because I feel it's another aspect of what we're talking about, some of these foundational relational skills that we don't talk about. In my family, which was the case where people go into separate corners, there's a period of pouting, and then everything goes back to normal. There's no opportunity to reflect because I think for some people and in some families, there's a good and a bad. Someone was right and a wrong. Instead of saying, oh, this was really curious what happened, I'm really tired and I wasn't listening to your story. I'm aware of something that happened in me and I'm also aware of how it reacted in you. And let's talk about that. You mentioned the space before,
Mm.
which I love, which is when you and I come together, there's the you and the me, and then there's the space between us. And we can be curious about that space, but often it ends up being, this is what you've done to me. This is what's
Yes.
going on with you. And we don't really acknowledge that there's this third thing that we create
Hmm.
together through our relationship and then try to nurture and care that the relationship. We tend to defend, attack, and counterattack.
Definitely. And it's
Yeah, the
very cognitive. And today we're talking about the body, the nervous system, that body to body communication and co regulation. And when we tackle repair the way I think our kind of Western Americanized culture does with this, I'm sorry, I meant this. It's all about, I want you to understand what I meant. It's extremely content driven, very analytical, and that doesn't translate, I don't think, very well to a felt sense inside of, I feel reconnected to you now. I feel seen, I feel felt. And it's that difference between that kind of, we haven't brought up these terms yet, the top down, which is like trying to change how we feel in our body through changing our thoughts. It's, if I can get you to understand me, then you can feel different or we can feel different, versus bottom up. It's through the body, through changing our bodily state, we can feel more connected. So it's okay, maybe we use less words right now. It looks like something happened here that felt bad to both of us. And maybe it's moving in close and using touch, or, okay, let's just sit and breathe here for a minute. That was tough. Like we really missed each other. And that's just, it's a very different way of going about rupture and repair, disconnection and reconnecting. And it seems like we all need a lot of help with that in our culture.
For sure. And you said something really important before, which is we can learn this through wonderful therapists like yourself who can model it. And we can do this with our friends or
Mm-hmm.
family and yes, even strangers. Well, we're all human, we'll all have triggers, but maybe there'll be moments where we're the calm one, where we can hold some space when someone else is not doing so well. I wanted to ask you, in talking about attunement and children who maybe never fully develop the ability to identify their emotions and body states,
Yeah.
what do you see later in the therapy room with those individuals as adults? What does chronic misattunement as a child look like as an adult?
That's a good question. So, one way that can manifest in adulthood is constant questioning of one's internal experience. Almost a
Mm.
hypervigilant, beyond doubt. There might be a primary emotion. It's this thing happened and I feel hurt. And then there's this, wait, is it okay to feel that? And lots of analytical thinking and lots of trying to figure out if that's an okay reaction to have. And people that I work with, a lot of capital T trauma, but I work with a lot of attachment trauma, which would be more about the relational context around growing up and feeling, having a potential capital T traumatic event where something catastrophic, something really life threatening, something really emotionally distressing, and not being attuned to. And also just chronic misattunement and invalidation and leaving kids alone in high distress states. I'll say that to clients a lot. Like, I think we can have a hypothesis here that even if you were loved and wanted, that's not the same as being attuned to. And sometimes caregivers would be horrified to know that you felt so misattuned to, but even parents that love and want their children can leave their children alone in high distress states because they're stressed out or they have a traumatized nervous system or they're a single parent or they're dealing with illness or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people I see who grow up in these type of environments do that, have that experience of hypervigilance about everything they think and feel, and can really collapse in on themselves. Like when I started tuning, something I see is it's so uncomfortable. If
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable. It's like I might gently say, "Well, that I can actually understand that," or I'll validate it in some way, and it's so hard for them to take in, or it almost makes them more anxious. And I'll usually
Yeah.
pause and do a piece of psycho ed at that moment and say, fascinating thing about our nervous system is that when we get the missing experience, when we get the thing that we long for that we never had, and it might be, I wish I was understood. I wish my emotions were okay with people. Our nervous system, our brain and body are prediction machines. And if it's a new experience, that is very likely going to register as a threat. Anything that is unfamiliar registers somewhere on the threat spectrum for our nervous system. And so a lot of times when you offer in the psychotherapy space, but we can even think of it outside of there, a person, the missing experience, like, I see you, or your emotions are okay with me. There's more anxiety because it's like, what is this? I don't know
Interesting.
what this is. I don't know this experience. And so that can be a really beautiful place to work because you can slow it down and you can make the intellectual connection, but then do kind of body based exercises around trying to find ways to help them take it in. Like, how would you know if your body was taking it in? What does that feel like? How does your body telling you that you're taking something in? And also, it's okay to not take it in. How maybe you only want to take in 5%, or it can be powerful just to sit with someone who's like, I can't take that in. And it's like, you know what? That's okay with me. You don't owe me anything. Because that can make them fold in on themselves. Now I'm being a bad client. Now I didn't take
Mm.
in the compliment. And people who grew up with chronic misattunement can feel that way. It's like, no, I haven't done the right thing for the other person. I'm never right. No matter what I do, it's not okay.
Wow. I'm imagining you have this tool that you're using yourself, your own nervous system in the room, and just with so much precision using this insight to calibrate all these different methods of
Mm-hmm.
working with people, and that but using the experience of being with them as a feedback to then adjust probably from session to session because
Yeah.
things change. Maybe there's one day someone is comfortable doing that, something's accessible to them on one day that might not be accessible on another. So it sounds like you are in real time very dynamically changing your approaches. I'm curious, and you said something about big T and attachment trauma. In terms of approaches, the wonderful Gabor Mate says trauma isn't what happens to you, but what
Mm-hmm.
happens inside you
Yeah.
as a result of what happened.
Yeah.
Does modern trauma research differentiate between the chronic developmental trauma we were just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
some of the attachment trauma, and then the what you referred to as the big T acute trauma? I'm wondering, how do you modify your treatment approaches based on those different presentations?
Yeah, that's a good question. Synthesizing what I know about theory and research, you're right that everything is very fluid and individualized, session to session, moment to moment. If I'm really doing the work well, it's moment to moment. Everyone's unique, and I'm always like updating my sense of someone. But when you think of kids who have experienced trauma and relational trauma, there are some presentations I look for being very easily overwhelmed by their emotional states, like adults that will become very easily flooded by emotional states, which
Mm,
I think is, we'll investigate. Might that be body memory of a young
interesting.
state where you were left alone in high distress and no one helped you co regulate? I
Yeah.
think when emotions feel so big and scary, one hypothesis I have is, could this be body memory? It was encoded as incredibly overwhelming because they were really little. And when we're little, emotions feel so frightening, especially if we don't have the mom in that anecdote from earlier in the hour that sits on the bed and says, yeah, it was like that, wasn't it? Yeah, that did not feel good. And get the good mirroring and attunement. I think about that with young trauma, with people who've experienced it young, that they may need a lot of containment when big emotion comes up. They feel panicky or start to dissociate, or feels like so much. You might contain with a little bit of psychoed. You're going to contain with your own voice, not being too syrupy, sweet, and contactful. That can actually be a little scary because it's like they didn't get that before. It's the unknown, it's the unfamiliar.
My understanding of the progression of trauma research has been that it's not about getting that catharsis of getting really poking at the trauma and getting it all out. That the research now very rightly is saying first it's about having the relationship, feeling safe with you as a therapist. That process, as you're describing it, you're saying that it might take someone some time before they're even comfortable with receiving that from you.
Exactly.
And one of the things that keeps coming up for me, even when I speak to people from different disciplines here, is just the importance of action. I recently spoke with Dr. Thomas Garton, the somatic coach for business executives, and Dr. Lewis Klein, the systems scientist. And in both conversations, they talked about the impact of regulation on organizations and societies. What they ended up finding, and Dr. Lewis Klein has field research on this, was that it came down to this interpersonal connection and the trust and the safety between the you and the me. I was being slightly cynical, maybe. They both took me to task a little bit, but I kept talking about how do you develop the capacity? I've been working in business over 20, 25 years, and I've come across lots of dysregulated executives. And in my mind, they don't have it. But both have pushed back and kept saying, no, Mary, it's not about capacity building. We have this, we all have this innate capacity. It's, as you said from the very beginning, right? This connection with our caregivers and lying chest to chest. It's stuff that gets in the way of it. So it's not so much that this person, my capacity for math or something, but it's something that's innate in the human experience. And when there's an interruption, it's really about some other adaptation that's getting in the way of something natural.
Well said. It's like there's some kind of interruption to connection, and then we have to form an adaptation. And that adaptation can look like micromanaging, compulsive eating, cutting, depression, anxiety, a critical voice, hypersexualized relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really well said. It's powerful to reframe behaviors that seem problematic as some kind of adaptation to somewhere along the way there was a disruption with connection, and this was the best you could do at that time with what you were working with to protect yourself.
I was like, what is the process we could create? What is the training? How do we fix this? And they responded to me, be attuned to them. All season, it keeps coming back to, we just need to treat each other better. It sounds very simplistic. You were giving examples earlier. You are really using your nervous system all day long. You're such an empathetic and caring person. There's just so much one person can really take. It feels boundaries are really important. Is there a boundary with attunement for folks that maybe become too attuned to others? Is there something that is around no boundaries around attunement?
Yeah, you know what it makes me think of that I think is really interesting? There's been some suggestion in the field of psychology that it's theory. There hasn't been like a randomized double-blind control study proving this. But people who, it is a nervous system state to quote unquote over attune to others. And let's think about a woman in a domestically situation with her male partner. And we hear about all these trauma responses, and we hear about fight, flight, freeze. Some of us may have heard about submit or collapse, and attaching and crying out for help. Those are some different trauma responses. And now people are talking about fawn. And it's been suggested in my field of study that is this nervous system state where there's a little bit of sympathetic nervous system mobilization. It's like a little bit of activation. It's not quite full on fight flight, but you got to be aware. But it also is a very modulated and regulated and socially aware and very astute. And it's let me regulate you because you look like you might hurt me. Kids have to do it with volatile parents. I used male on female violence, but this could happen in any kind of relationship, any gender combination. But that I would actually say is a little bit of a trauma response. Let me be so attuned to the sound of your hand on the doorknob and what kind of state are you walking in with, and what can I do to regulate you so you don't blow up?
Yeah, I can see the danger being that child, then growing to be that adult. You really are so externally focused, you abandon yourself, your own point of view. It reminds me, so many comedians had childhoods where they had very dysregulated adults, and they became the little comedian.
That makes sense
because it calmed dad down, or it cheered mom up. And a number of them, I think Dana Carvey and so many of them became the sad clown archetype. But then that becomes who you are, as we were talking about patterns and how you learn who you are. I'd love to switch gears a little bit. And you've had a distinguished career. You're on the faculty at the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine. You also maintain your own private consulting practice. What drew you into this field originally, and what continues to motivate you?
I think it's a function of my attachment background that one of my adaptations was to try to really understand people's motivations and why they do what they do. That's one part from my own shaping that I think makes me gravitate towards this field. And the other one, which is really simpatico with our topic today, is so from my kind of attachment background that's helps me want to go towards this field is wanting to feel connected. And I like most about the process of psychotherapy. There are many things I like, many parts of my brain that light up, and my analytical part, my conceptual part, and solving problems part. But when we were talking about attunement and people's attachment injuries and the interpersonal space with the client and the therapist, I actually really love that. I also think we need to humanize therapists. We are human beings walking around in our own body with our own attachment history. I picked this because it resonates. I like talking to people. I like relating. I like listening. I like sharing. So I've been very lucky.
I think the very best therapists, and this is being a fans of folks like Gabor or Mate, who've had their own experiences, and therapists I've known throughout my life, is that those are the best therapists who are brought to the work because they understand it here in the heart and here in the mind. And also back to what we were saying about trauma research and therapy being so relational. Back, there was a time where they used to call it like blank screen, right? Where a therapist would just be completely devoid of any kind of reaction or emotion. And that was considered the appropriate response. And what a lost opportunity for everyone involved.
Here's an interesting thing to link this back to, because we've been talking about the nervous system and the human infant. Have you heard of the blank face babies?
Yes.
So there was research done.
Some mommies smiled, some remained
just
emotionless.
Flat affect.
And they
And
did it, my understanding is they did it with babies that were just regular, just hanging out,
yep,
and then they also did that, and I think eventually this was the ethics board nixed this, but even a baby was in discomfort or crying, they had some mothers that were
to
allowed to
soothe and
respond.
some who couldn't.
Yes.
I
Yes.
recently watched a little bit of that video and I just involuntarily, this wasn't without a lot of cognitive thoughts. Oh, that's so awful. My body, my nervous system, I just teared up because you
Wow.
could see these infants with otherwise positive bonds with that was mothers in this infant lab and they were doing research where the mom was playing and doing reciprocity and the eye contact and that kind of back and forth play, and then went flat, and then they would cry, and the mom would still just be flat looking. And they did so many things. They arched their backs, they reached, they tried to be the clown, they tried to make mommy laugh, then they cried. And you could, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is this condensed version of all the adaptations we make throughout our entire life when connection breaks and all the ways we try to get it back. And it was so profound. And so we now know one of the most distressing experiences for human beings as social mammals that co regulate is being faced with someone's flat affect, blank face. It actually is a very like sympathetic nervous system activating. It can feel scary. Think about how they used to do psychoanalysis. You're lying prone. What if you have a trauma history where you were interpersonally victimized? That position isn't safe. Talk about body memory. Therapist is facing away from you, flat affect, and not engaging. That is not co-regulatory.
No. Decades and decades of people dealing with this. And then, some of the examples at the beginning, or even you discussing rupture and repair and sharing how even in your work, sometimes it's going to happen because you're two humans. That's a wonderful opportunity to teach
Yeah.
and to deepen and strengthen the relationship and to model that healthy relationships do this as a process of growth. And it makes both people stronger and better for it. And so I'm so grateful that you have found this field and that you bring your full humanness to it, because I'm absolutely certain it makes you a fantastic therapist. This was such a wonderful conversation. As we start to wind up, I'm wondering if there's anything about attunement and rupture and repair, which I feel this is so important for everyone right now. And I feel like there are days where we're going to be stronger for it, that we can help others. And then there's going to be times where we're going to need to receive others' patience and grace from us, and normalizing this outside of a therapy context
Yes.
for folks to talk about that this is the human experience. There's nothing wrong or bad about having these experiences, but there's so much we can learn. I'm wondering if there's anything else that we didn't touch on that you might want to bring up.
Thank you for asking. It's funny that you said that. Was in closing out, I was also thinking of all the things that we talked about, like attunement. And I would just offer to listeners, including ourselves, just a little felt experiment of moving through the next day or week, thinking about what it means to both receive feeling felt and to offer feeling felt. We have to reflect on our own experience. I think we have to go in before we can come out. So give yourself permission to think about, how do you experience that with people around you or want to? And then I think it would be a really healthy interpersonal challenge for all of us to be like, okay, how can I help someone feel felt today? And pick a person a day. And it may be someone, who's like trying to get the seat next to you. I think it would really push us to do it with people that are strangers, but even
I think this is how you change the world.
yeah,
I think what you're talking about is one interaction at a
yeah.
time. It really magnifies this energy. That person who you're kind to is going to be maybe a little kinder to the next person.
And my one little thing I would add on is check out what happens when you have a moment of resonance with someone where you help them feel felt. Be curious what happens inside you. I know for me, it usually feels immediately pretty good. And like, think
Yeah.
about, to make it somatic, it's like, how does your body tell you it feels good? Pay attention. How does your body communicate? It feels good to help someone else feel felt. Is it warmth? Is it tingling? Is it energizing? Is it grounding? I think that's a really nice reflection.
That is such a beautiful takeaway and an exercise. And just as you're describing it and taking it full circle, we don't usually, unless it's something like something has a pain or an ache, we don't really think about the messages our body is telling us. And I love that you're really focusing on there's other messages than those medical
You
or
bet.
biological
You
ones.
bet.
There's other really important things it's telling you. And I wrote this down. It's going to be the title of this episode,
Yeah.
but feeling felt is just
Cool.
such a beautiful way of describing this. And it's, yeah, thank you so much,
I'm glad you
Megan.
like it. Yeah.
I love it. And by the way, I think everything you said about what brought you into your field certainly resonates to me. And even why I do this podcast
I
is
suspect. Yeah, I'm like, I get it.
you. Of course, you
Yeah.
had me all read
Well,
and analyzed.
more just like, and into just, yeah, people who like this were meeting a need, or resonating with something.
I don't know if you're familiar with the term ikigai, the Japanese concept of how to find your purpose
Yeah.
in life. It's like, do what you love, do what you're good at,
Yeah.
do what you can get paid for, and then do what the world needs.
Mm.
And so I believe there's some sort of alchemy in
Mhm.
having someone who wasn't heard as a child, who then really wants to talk and then has a podcast and then talks about
Yeah.
being heard as a child on the
Yeah, you
podcast. And
bet.
it really is a way of exercising some of
Yeah.
that, but also transmuting it into something that maybe someone's listening that's going to be a little bit different to their kid, or maybe there's a kid who grew up who didn't have that, who's going to understand it earlier.
Yeah.
I think this is how we show up in the world, is
Yeah.
to learn and grow. And luckily you are in the world helping people learn and grow. And what a gift you are to your profession.
Thank
And
you.
you've been a real gift to me and so generous with your time and your expertise today. And I am really deeply honored and grateful.
Yeah. Thank you.
so much.
Thank
for
you,
coming on.
Mary.